Renate, for inviting me again to speak about surrogacy at the Malaysian Conference. And I pay my respect to the Aboriginal elders past present for not ceding sovereignty to their countries. A year later, and alas, I cannot tell you that surrogacy has been abolished. I wish. However, we are not stopping trying to achieve this aim, and I will start with some good news. Last year, I introduced this book, Towards the Abolition of Surrogate Motherhood, which we were very happy to publish at Spinifex in 2021. Now, we have already a French, Italian, and Spanish version of this book, and in 24 there will also be a German translation. This means that people in many countries will be able to read the thoughts of 15 radical feminists from France, Japan, Spain, India, Austria, the UK, the US, Italy, and of course Australia, with Catherine Lynch's important word on the relation between adoption and surrogacy and the suffering they both cause to children, and my 7 strategies to stop surrogacy, including the very important one to quote, stop the glorification of sacrifice and self-harm by women, which I call the compassion trap. It is indeed fabulous to know that these books are out there and are being read, and the decent sale numbers seem to show that they are. But I increasingly wonder what people do with this information. Especially in Australia, surrogacy has almost disappeared from the public eye as a topic over the last year. There were a few exceptions. For instance, when on the 2nd March 2022, VARCA, the Victorian Assisted Reproductive Treatment Authority, announced with joy and pride the arrival of a baby from surrogacy for a single gay man, as if this was really worth celebrating. But yes, they said, it shows us how accepting of diversity we are in Victoria. Oh, and before you ask, he and his surrogate are, of course, best mates. In a news report, she's even seen feeding her baby boy. And she was actually surrogate number 4, after the first 3 dropped out and no explanation was given for that. Apparently, this story is now inspiring to other single men in Victoria to also start surrogacy, with one of them, an Indian man planning on bringing his parents over from India to look after his yet to be conceived child. Childcare sorted. In all of Australia, Victoria is at the forefront of increasing reproductive technology services. For instance, since October 22, IVF will be free for 4,000 quote deserving people. They are low-income earners in outer metropolitan Melbourne and regional Victoria. And get this, deserving people include people who need donor or surrogacy services, such as LGBTIQ+, and single people. And it does not stop that there. The free IVF service will also be available, quote, to those with cancer or undergoing gender reassignment treatments. No doubt, Victoria is thinking ahead. As most of you would know, surrogacy in Australia is regulated by the states and the territories. But in 2015-16, we have a federal parliamentary inquiry into surrogacy. While they actually acknowledged our radical feminist submissions and demand for abolition of all surrogacy, in the final report we were dismissed as unrealistic since there is, quote, no reasonable prospect of a ban on commercial surrogacy in the near future. The committee must focus on how the potential risks and harms of international commercial surrogacy can be minimized. Such defeatist thinking. Regulation is the only one answer. Still, we have to be grateful that commercial surrogacy was ruled out for Australia. This remains the case until today. But I remain uneasy that there appears to be a lot of lobbying activities behind the public's back. It is one area where those of us who want to stop this practice once and for all are really disadvantaged. We simply do not have the willpower to send delegations across ministers' offices trying to influence whatever laws might be in the making, which we don't know yet about. For instance, the 2016 committee report recommended that the Commonwealth's task the Law Reform Commission to within a year produce a report on, quote, best practice altruistic surrogacy and on how to develop a model national law on surrogacy. Such a report was never produced. This is most probably due to the fact that the past Liberal governments, plural, have had no appetite for new national laws. Catherine Lynch and I had established a good connection with the Attorney General's office, where we even found an ally. Now, obviously, this connection no longer exists, and we have yet to contact the new Attorney General's office. I have no idea what Mark Dreyfus thinks of surrogacy, but my instincts tell me not to expect too much support for abolition. Given that so many government departments are part of the Australian Workplace Equality Index, AWE, a subset of ACO's pride in the diversity programs, we can only hope that the fervent support for surrogacy by the G&T committee will not influence the federal government in relation to surrogacy. And I'm actually very worried. Since I've written this, I have found out, I've been told, that there is a federal inquiry into reproductive health care. Now, it's mostly supposed to be about abortion and contraception, but some kind soul has already sent me 4 submissions, all by gay men who go on and on about surrogacy and how discriminated they are, because you can't have IVF on Medicare if it's for surrogacy. So they want that. They also want surrogates advertised because they have such problems finding one. Now, so this is new. In May we will get the final report what the government is doing. A group of people who are clearly more than interested in expanding surrogacy are lawyers. A long-known supporter of LGBTQ plus people is Brisbane surrogacy lawyer Stephen Page, you might know him, who is now the father with his husband of a 3-year-old daughter made via surrogacy in Australia. Now, another Brisbane surrogacy lawyer, Sarah Jefford, is getting a lot of attention, recently even receiving a Medal of the Order of Australia for her services to surrogacy and donor conception. She has published a book called More Than Just a Baby, a guide to surrogacy for intended parents and surrogates. As Amazon says when promoting her book, Sarah offers a truly unique perspective, as she is also an IVF mum, an egg donor, and a surrogate. Indeed, it couldn't be in better hands, and she's still alive. In the scheme of things, altruistic surrogacy taking place in Australia is not very big. Industry support, so the pro people claim that there are about 100 babies born per year, which means fewer than 100 surrogacies, because there are still a lot of twin births. And of course, we don't know how many surrogacies were started and then abandoned with no baby at the end, because IVF doesn't really work very well. Even by counting the numbers of babies resulting from commercial surrogacy abroad, which is a crime in New South Wales, Queensland and the ACT, but never punished, the number of children increases to about 200, so about 300 in total. This is, of course, 300 children too many who were robbed of their birth mother and are products of trafficking, which contravenes the UN Convention Against Transnational Crimes. Now, these people who are basically critical of surrogacy often say, but we have to regulate surrogacy because it exists. What they forget is that if we close down surrogacy worldwide today, we would only have to deal with, say, a maximum of 1,000 babies, some of whom are still in their mother's wombs, and some others on their way to the countries of the baby buyers. Unlike in adoption, where a child already exists that needs a permanent home of some kind if their parents are dead or can't care for them, in surrogacy, the business of manufacturing an embryo and then implanting the embryo into the birth mother's womb only starts after a contract has been signed. In other words, there are no pre-existing babies. It is simply not true that we cannot abolish surrogacy because of the children. And yet, this is what we are being told again and again. It is the basis for big threats to emerge in the last years, but especially since 2021, from large international pro-surrogacy groups who all tell us that their mission is to protect the children. The biggest threats comes from International Social Services, ISS, a very big and established international NGO, domiciled in Geneva, but with a strong presence in Canberra, which is concerned with the welfare of children who are refugees and migrants and born of surrogacy. In March 2021, a group of over 100 international experts, amongst them Maud de Boer-Boquicio, a former UN Special Rapporteur on the sale and sexual exploitation of children, who should know better, and lots of internationally known strong promoters of adoption, created the Verona Principles for the protection of the right of the child born through surrogacy. You have to get this phrase into your brain, the rights of children. The Verona Principles are a bit like the Yogyakarta Principles for transgender people. Those are a blueprint for transgenderism, and these are a blueprint for surrogacy. They were written by a big interest group and have never been ratified by the UN or other international bodies. But they are treated as if they were official international instruments. The Verona Principles are a set of rules of how to do surrogacy. Not to consider whether surrogacy can ever be ethical or should exist at all, no. Simply to say that surrogacy is a fact, and these are the rules for states how surrogacy must be done so that children are protected. Such statements ignore the fact that commercial surrogacy is only legal in a very small minority of countries in the world, but then new countries such as Colombia want to allow altruistic surrogacy, and Germany and Norway are toying with this idea too. With the 18 principles, the Verona Principles are the bulldozers of neoliberal politics that wag their fingers into our faces and say, do surrogacy as we tell you, or else. When women are mentioned in these principles, and they're only mentioned once in Principle 7, we are advised that, and that's a quote, the surrogate mother should be in a position to make independent and informed decisions free from exploitation and coercion. Really, it's a laughable sentence. This sentence rules out about 98% or more of all surrogacies. But who are these experts kidding? But the Verona Principles sound good, and lots of ordinary people will fall for them. After all, don't we all want only the best for children everywhere? And really, who cares about the women? Another big organization that is a big threat to us and also only wants the best for children is the HCCH, the Permanent Bureau of the Hague Private International Law Conference, which is an intergovernmental organization. No one has ever been able to convincingly tell me why the world needs this private international Hague conference that writes a lot of conventions, such as, for example, the 1980 Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child adoption, which has led to the plight of the Hague mothers. Then in 1993, the HCCH developed the Convention on Inter-Country Adoption, hated by critics of adoption such as Catherine Lynch, which is described by the HCCH as the convention aims to ensure that inter-country adoption only occurs when in the best interest of the child. Another laughable sentence, sure. So in the best interest of the child is what HCCH might want to write on the banner. And that's where we are going with the work on a convention on surrogacy and or a protocol on parentage. Since 2015, a group of about 30 international experts, mostly lawyers, have been meeting annually to work on such a convention or a protocol. In 2019, they were given a year's extension by the governing group of the HCCH, the Council on General Affairs and Policy. Finally, this next week, March 7th to the 10th, they will be submitting their 50-page report to the Council. Now, we were all expecting the worst. When I say we, this is mostly the organization ICASM, who put this book together that I mentioned in France. We were really expecting the worst, thinking that there would be the presentation of a finished convention and or a protocol would be happily married together with the Verona principles. But no, good news. The 50-page report is neither a draft convention on surrogacy nor a protocol on parentage. What it is 50 pages of legalese detailing in what ways these eminent experts agreed, or more often disagreed with one another about A, what should be included in these instruments, and B, how they should be presented. It took me 2.5 days to read these 50 pages. I fell asleep twice, and I congratulated myself at least 20 times that I had not become a lawyer. Sorry, Janet and others. In the end, though, the incredible amount of disagreement in these pages make it clear that there is no fully fledged document on surrogacy. What this group wants is more money to continue their deliberations, which I think they will be granted. You don't throw $100 million or so, that's my own calculation of costs, since 2015, and then give up without a product. So I expect they might get a couple of years extension or so until they come up with a convention and or a protocol, or both. They can't even decide amongst themselves which one would be better, because the states have to then agree to want them. And so in this 50 page they say, it might be more desirable to have a protocol because the states might be more attracted to it because of blah, blah, blah. And then the next expert says, but no, the states might not like it for exactly the same reason. It's hilarious. It's just hilarious. But okay, obviously I am not naive. In the end, the HCCH will get there, and we will have very serious work to do to stem the global influence of these two instruments in tandem with the Verona principles. But what has happened is that we got some breathing space, which is unexpected and good. But by now you will probably ask, what is actually being deliberated? Well, it's all about parentage, best bestowed on children born of international surrogacy agreement. You need to read these 50 pages to see how many different ways are proposed to give the children safety and an identity. The most important thing is, however, to make sure that the surrogate mother and her partner, if there is one, are replaced by the commissioning parents, the baby bearers, in my language. Now, it is true that the current ways of acquiring parentage for baby bearers are cumbersome. In Australia, you either have to adopt a child born by a so-called surrogate mother or go before a court to be proclaimed the legal parents of a child, or children. This is both costly and time-consuming. So the idea to arrive with a piece of paper called parentage order, which, if your country is a signatory to the Hague, which Australia is, waves you through. For instance, if you come in from overseas, through border control, no problems asked, no questions asked. Now, this is very desirable that such a piece of paper exists, because you could then go to countries where surrogacy is totally illegal and still get in with your baby. This is why this is pushed like crazy by pro-surrogacy groups internationally, all under the banner it's for the protection of the child. Now, my time is probably up, and we were told to finish on a positive note. Here is just the latest quite crazy idea, published in the reputable journal Theoretical Medicine and Bioethics, that brain-dead women could be used as surrogates in Australia. And when the child is born, meaning lifted out of the woman's body, then, hooray, the woman's organs can then also be used for donations. 2 for 1. Now, of course, this will not happen. But the fact that it is proposed again, because it was already proposed by an Australian bioethicist in 1988, and I write about it in my book Infertility, which was published in 1989, that's of great concern. And this time it is called Whole Body Gestational Donation, and it's written by a woman, Anna Smador of the University of Oslo in Norway. Now, lastly, very lastly, on another cheerful note, have you heard of Ectolife? ECTO and then life with a capital L. Unfortunately, Megan had to go home, but if you put it in Google, you will find a lovely video, 8 minutes long, which is about an artificial womb system consisting of pods that are lined up in a lab and can produce your genetically engineered perfect child. It is eugenics in action, especially if you can afford to buy an elite package. So, give yourself 8 minutes of joy and watch this video, see what the big boys think is going to happen. Now, rest assured this will not happen either, because globally it is not permitted to grow a human embryo outside a mother's body for more than 14 days. I mean, that's the first hurdle. But still, it's quite a really exciting, an exciting video. You have all these pods lined up in a huge area, and you see everybody has a little embryo growing into fetus, then in the child. And with the elite package, you can sing to it, because it has special earplugs where you can listen to the mother singing to him or the father, and it's just wonderful. It really is wonderful. So I will end with that, and just want to say to you that in terms of activism, as I said, I think there's not a lot of discussion around, but when there is discussion around, it's always like, oh, isn't it so nice? These poor 2 gay boys who can't have a child now can have a child. So, and I think what we all should do when we hear such a conversation, we should try and shame them. We should say, what? You really think it's okay to exploit a woman for this? You really wouldn't want to do that, would you? And sometimes when you say something straight in somebody's face, they might just listen for 5 seconds before they go on to say how good it was that these poor girl boys can have babies. And the other answer is men don't have babies. Some people don't like that. So, thank you very much.